Right, Mr. Matt.
Hello.
Hello. Well, you can tell you're in holiday mode.
Sure am.
Well, this is a nice little change this week, isn't it, Matt?
Oh, well, you know what they say, a change is as good as a rest.
A rest is as good as a rest.
Yeah, a rest. Oh, I love a rest.
Which is good as the rest.
I'm having a rest right now.
Oh, so listen, you popped on your own on the old social media. You had a little moment there. Not a little moment, that sounds a bit dramatic, but you did pop it, that you were having a week off.
Yes.
Or more than a week off. And a little, can we say the word holiday? I've said it. A little holiday.
A holiday, yes.
A holidayette.
Yes.
And you said that actually there was a surprising feeling of relaxation and sort of nourishment that you experienced. What was that all about?
It's less what I've been doing. It's more what I haven't been doing.
Yeah.
Because I adore
Detox.
but detox from everything, really. I adore what I do, and I'm so grateful that I get to say that, and I'm proud of what I do, and I love it. And I've learned, when I first started doing on my personal training, I was very much on my phone 16 hours a day trying to help everyone, and it sent me over the edge a few times in a bit of, I wasn't managing my own mental well-being. But over the 3.5 years of doing this, I've learned how to do it. And I can dip in and out, and even on holiday, and it doesn't, basically, I'm not explaining this very well, because I love what I do, I don't think of it so much as work all the time, but obviously sometimes there is lots of it, which is fine. But stepping away and having some time off, as much as I enjoy what I do, it's been nice to not do it without sounding ungrateful.
No, it doesn't sound ungrateful at all. I think you have to, everybody needs time off, right? You know, I mean, even emergency doctors need time off. You know, you can't save someone's lives all the time, right? Because you'd be exhausted. So I think it's all relevant. Yes.
It's given me thinking time as well, which I don't always get if I'm always on the go and always doing. This has allowed me to step back and go, oh, okay, maybe actually like just daydream almost about what I want to do, how I can help people, what I can expand, what needs adjusting. It's been good. Thank you.
I always think that's a little odd with mindfulness, because mindfulness is essentially permissive daydreaming in a way. It is supposed to be being conscious of the very moment, and people sometimes can be dismissive about daydreaming. But of all of the highly creative people and successfully creative people I've spoken to, they all advocate, and if you look throughout history, same thing. They all advocate what they call daydreaming. Sit in a chair looking into space. And I remember quite a long time ago, I worked with a creative consultant from a very, very famous, globally famous creative agency. And he used to sit in a chair and just gaze out of the window. And he was being paid a phenomenal amount of money, like huge amounts of money. And there was a bit of unrest because obviously it had been leaked, not how much he was being paid, but it had been leaked that this guy, he was on a lot of money, he was coming in to turn the fortunes of this business around. But he just, quote unquote, sat in a chair staring out the window for most of the day. And at the time I thought it was a really interesting thing to have the confidence to do that, to be actively doing nothing. But then I realized, of course, he wasn't doing nothing. He was freeing his mind up from stress and allowing his mind to sort of, drift off into spaces, and came up with the most phenomenal ideas, just totally left field. And it seemed effortless, but of course it wasn't. It's because he didn't have the pressure there to perform all the time. He took that downtime. So,
very much. And of course, to the man in the street, it does look like someone just sitting in a chair staring into space. Yeah. But it's not. There is. That was in itself was the process.
I love that. Well, I think it's important that we embrace change, Matt.
I love a bit of change. Where do you stand on change?
Oh. So the new book I'm writing is about change. So so where I stand on it is I'm having to self-edit, so that I don't A, railroad an episode, and that B, we're not here on Thursday still talking about change. With you saying I should have checked out 48 hours ago, banging on the door.
Housekeeping.
Yes, you really must leave now. So, hey, on Twitter this morning, talking of hotels, I read a lady said my best friend and her young family checked into a hotel. Big shout out to the couple who were actively having sex in the wardrobe when they checked into their room.
In the wardrobe?
I know, right? So I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's so much to unpack here. You know, like if it's your room, you don't need to do it in the wardrobe, right?
Unless that's a thing.
Well, that's another avenue, right? If it's not your room, and it was all risky, let's go do it, then why do it in a wardrobe, right? Because there's no one else in the room. And if it was like, oh, let's do it in a hotel room that's not ours, we might get caught. Don't do it in a wardrobe, because you you might not get caught. But yeah, the wardrobe thing, I think the more you unpack it, you think, I think that's like a thing.
I think it might be.
Well, I've always wanted to do is do it in a wardrobe. And my mind started racing, Matt. I'm going to be honest with you.
Of course. Where did it race to?
I think we both know where it raced to. And it was the practicalities. I'm a very practical person. And so I started to think about that. And it's not the most spacious or practical of places in which to perform that act, is it?
No. I mean, a walk-in wardrobe. You literally walk into it.
Oh, hang on. So
maybe it was.
Yeah, there wasn't any specifics about a wardrobe with two doors, a button hinge butt.
I imagine it I imagine it wasn't like a Billy bookcase from IKEA.
Well, no, because it was a wardrobe, not a bookcase. But I see your point, yeah.
I couldn't think of the brand name for an IKEAN wardrobe.
IKEAN, yeah, me neither. Probably Flesh House or something like that.
Flesh House?
No. All right, Mike. Moving on. So
moving on. Change the topic
very quickly. I believe strongly that there are two cornerstones to change. There are sort of two things I really want to talk about today. One is there are two cornerstones to change that are pivotal, but are, for most people, moss covered and covered in weeds and other life flowers, so you don't even know the cornerstones are there.
Amazing.
And that is that we habituate very quickly in life. We get used to things very quickly, which is a really, really important and beneficial part of being human, because it means we can adapt and evolve very quickly to life's changes. However, with that comes the greatest challenge, that because we get used to what we've got, we don't actively change, or we don't seek to do different things, because we have established comfort zones, which I think we've spoken about before, are our comfort zones. We decided that they were going to be there. We decided that comfort zones were going to be here and not here or here. So therefore we can move them. So that's the first thing, is that habituation, our ability to adapt, is brilliant, but it's also possibly one of, if not the greatest obstacle that we face as humans. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that there's this strange dichotomy with change, in that things are changing all the time. No two sunsets or sunrises are the same. Change happens to us all the time. Every time your phone software updates, it changes the way you interact with your phone. You buy a new cookbook, it changes the way you cook. Change is happening every day, all the time. We change as well, actively. We decide different songs or different artists we're going to listen to, or different authors we're going to read, or a new TV series or whatever. But when change happens to us, we are inherently very resistant to it. And change is one of those topics that actually most people are very resistant of. They don't like change. They don't seek change. They don't feel comfortable going through change. Yet it's happening all the time. And I've come up with this theory for the book. And that is that, mind-blowing, here it is, the theory.
Hit me.
Oh my gosh, that's reminded me of when John Cleese plays, oh gosh, what's her name? Anne Elks. Do you remember Anne Elks?
No.
I have a
in Monty Python.
Yes, she's. Well, it's not in the film Monty Python. It's in the sketches that they do.
Yeah.
And she is. She has a theory. She's invited onto the Science Today or something like that, where we discuss science today. And Anne Elks has a theory about the Brontosaurus, and she goes, "I have a theory. A theory, it is my theory, a theory of mine, of which it is mine, of a theory, which is my theory, which I would like to share you to today about the Brontosaurus, a theory of the Brontosaurus, of which it is mine, my theory. And my theory of the Brontosaurus, of which is a theory, is of mine, my theory, is that the Brontosaurus is... it's smaller at one end than it is the other. And that is my theory, of which it is mine, my theory." And it's this big build. I love it. You'll have to YouTube Anne Elks Brontosaurus, or just Anne Elks theory or something. It's great. Anyway, my theory is that in the same way that there are seasonal changes, spring, summer, autumn, winter, human beings go through the same 4 periods of change every time there is a change. So we go through a period of, and it normally starts in the equivalent of autumn. So we go through a period of repair and a sort of stripping back. It then enters a period of dormancy, which is a sort of recovery phase. So you've stripped everything back. I'll explain this in a bit more detail. Then you enter a period of growth, which is spring, and then a period of abundance, which is summer. And then, of course, it keeps cycling round. So every time you change, you enter a period of, just like autumn, where you say, okay, we need to strip stuff back, cancel things, cut things down, remove things, whatever. There's a period then of dormancy where you have to wait for the right things to happen to get into place, for things to settle before you start to grow again.
Yeah.
Then obviously the growth period is obvious. Period of abundance, summer, but there's lots of lovely things happening, is obvious too. And each of those phases, of course, in real life, in nature, they're fairly equal. But in our life, in human life, they can be very different. You can spend most of your time in abundance and a little bit of time in the repair, and then a bit of, even smaller time in dormancy. And sometimes that dormant period can be days before you start to see growth and the fruits of your labor begin to happen. However, I also believe that, and I've noticed this probably increasingly over the last 5 years, rapidly, there is a strange social pressure and an assumption that we spend more time in that abundant phase, that there is an assumption that people's lives should be and are in abundance all the time, and that they can't be going through this period of change, and that we shouldn't tell people that we're in a dormancy period, or that we're in a period of I think that active change actually happens in autumn.
That was going to be my question. Which of the seasons is when the change actually happens?
Yeah, I think most change happens when you recognize, doesn't it, that it needs to happen? I know that sounds obvious and a bit patronizing. I don't mean it to sound like that. But, when there comes, the mechanism is, hang on a minute, something needs to change. And from that moment, you will think differently, you will behave differently, and the consequences of your actions will be different too. And so, for example, I'm moving house, and as soon as I had sold the house or accepted an offer on the house, my attitude towards it changes. Okay, I don't need to take that with me. Why have I got this thing? I'll sell that. We don't need this many of this thing. You go through that period of stripping things back, and preparing. In autumn, you're digging goodness into the soil. you're feeding things, you're cutting stuff back so that it allows the roots to grow, so that the distraction isn't on the abundance, but it's on, you know, the what goes on underneath, the sort of behind the scenesy stuff.
Preparing.
Yeah, the preparation. And I think that period of change is really important. But I don't think we talk about it enough, which is why I said to you at the beginning, gosh, I think this is going to be a bit difficult to do change in a little amount of time, because we don't talk about it enough, Matt. We sort of shy away from it, don't you think?
Well, absolutely. Why do you think people are resistant to change, or some change?
Well, I think fundamentally, because it's an alien concept, it's the same way why people are resistant to talking about death, or why we grieve so badly in the West. Because it's not been normalized. You know, from the second we were born, there's one trajectory and one outcome that we're all heading towards, right? And people say, oh, that's really morbid. And I used to say things like, you know, how many summers do you have left? And because that puts into perspective what you do every day. And still people say, oh gosh, that's a really morbid thing. It's not morbid. It's entirely normal and biological. Yeah. And if you're shying away from it, it's no wonder that you're still grieving about your mum who died 20 years ago, because you didn't normalize the fact that that was going to happen, and that what we should do is celebrate life that happened and not grieve for something that's not going to ever change. So, and that's very quickly brushed aside because I know it's not the subject of the conversation, but I know it's a lot deeper. I think people find it very difficult to accept if you don't know who you are, and you don't know what you haven't identified your boundaries in life, and you haven't identified your own, what's the word I'm looking for? Your own values. That's good. Yeah, that will do. We'll run with that one. Then it's very difficult when change is forced upon you, or when you feel change happening and you're not fully in control of it. It's very difficult to accept that, because there is an uncertainty and anxiety around the fear of the unknown. And so, oh, that's my dog. And so naturally...
There's the unknown.
Yes, absolutely. And so naturally, you're a little bit more fearful, a little bit more resistant of it. Yeah. You're not all embracing of it, because we need security. We need reassurance. We need to know that this is going to be okay. I suppose it's similar to... And of course, in a business sense, a lot of our listeners might be able to relate to this. If you're thinking of a new job, well, a new job is really risky too, right? Because you're moving from the security that you have right now. You're being paid regularly on time for doing a job that presumably they're happy with, otherwise you wouldn't still be in the job.
Yep.
But you've been enticed for whatever reason for a different job. And of course, what will happen is the employer will add on lots of security blankets. They'll say, of course, there's a pension scheme, and we've got, you know, twice as many sick leave and holiday leave that you can have, and we've got a company gym, and we've got a company car. Those are all nonsense things there to sort of massage you and comfort you and ease the transition to make that change feel okay. Those are classic examples, I think, of sort of pathological things that we, you know, physical things that we get given to help make change feel better. But the fascinating thing I'm more interested in is your job, similarly to mine, but yours in a much more literal sense and physical sense, is about change, right? People come to you without sort of saying it, but maybe they do actively say it more than they would do for me. I want to change. I want to be somebody different. I want to look or feel different. And so as a person that is actively in an industry of a change industry, do you see any particular patterns with regards to change? So do you see people sort of, I don't know, asking for one particular thing a lot? Is it always about one avenue of humanity or human existence? Or do you spot anything that sort of, you know, stands out?
A unifying way to describe what you're asking for is people want to be comfortable in their own skin. And that means different things to different people, and changing their physicality is usually part of that. That's why we're working together, because that is a part of it. And we're a visual species. We use our eyes so much more than than our other senses. So of course, what we see in the mirror and how we see and view ourselves is important. Part of my job is helping people, be ready for that change, be ready for, making sure that they get that they're prepared for it, actually, because obviously 99.9, no, it's always good what happens, but
Yes.
people aren't always prepared for, or just their unexpected benefits, for example, are so delightful, like people realizing they can go and do that thing they didn't do before.
Sure.
And it's not because of how they look. And I've talked about this before, but it's just about what doing something good for yourself allows you to be that new person. But I think but some people come to me and they think they're ready, but they're not. And so helping people understand that change is good helps people move forward. And actually what you were just saying earlier sparked something that you're right. Change is happening all the time. On a cellular level, we're regenerating all the time. So isn't it something like every 6 weeks we're a completely new, different, every cell in our body is completely died and renewed, or something like that?
Yeah.
So we're never the same person that we were yesterday, because the skin cells have died and fallen off and new ones have grown again. And I think the more we all understand that change is inevitable, but change is omnipresent and ongoing, I think can reassure people that actually wanting to change isn't a bad thing, and it can happen whenever you're ready to commit to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really nice, knowing that sense of control is important. You know, if change isn't right for you right now, that's okay too.
Yeah, you could be in the dormant phase, like you said.
Exactly that. You can ease into it at a pace that's ready for you. And I think that sort of, maybe we should pause and come back to this in our sort of part 2 chat. But
lovely.
I think that's the key to effective change always, is that it must be at a pace that you're comfortable with, and it must be going somewhere where you have an identified sort of goal or endpoint or strategy, and that might change. That's fine. But blindly,
change can change.
Exactly that. Yeah. Blindly just sort of changing stuff for the sake of it is it can be quite dangerous, and also it can have mental health implications as well for us as well, because you can feel lost through a period of change. You can lose elements of your identity. The simplest of things is it's difficult to think of a way to explain this unless you've been through this, but many people, not all, have been through a period of significant change. Not that they would necessarily think about it like that. They would probably think about it as an exciting phase in their house. So you might redecorate the living room, or you might move into a new house and you've got an extra room. And you think, oh, what should we do with this room? We've got a utility room now, or we've got a sunroom, or whatever. Or you've moved and you've got a smaller house and you think, oh, okay, we have to change up the way that we live in our space. And if you've got, completely redecorated your bedroom, new light shades, new laundry, all that kind of jazz, there's a different identity immediately to that room, right? It looks different, obviously, liquor paint, whatever. And I think that feeling is a very interesting one on a micro scale. So redecorating a room and it feeling like a different room. I feel different because I identify differently with this room now because this furniture is new and we've changed it around and the way that we use it is different or whatever. Now, if you can imagine that on a global scale for all of your life, then that's quite a significant change, that nothing at all in your life feels familiar anymore. And you very often, that space is very often occupied post-crisis. So the loss of a family pet, the loss of somebody close to you in your family, a breakup of a relationship or whatever, because you're clutching for identity, you're clutching for comfort, for something that feels okay. And it's interesting that that's our go-to. Our go-to is, give me something that hasn't changed. Give me something that feels familiar. But there is an alternative, and the alternative is you jump and you fly, and you run straight head into this change, and you look at it in a completely different way. And so I'm sort of on a mission, I think, to get people to think about change differently. I think I want them to think about it in the same way I want people to think about death differently. And maybe my mission is thinking about things differently. I don't know.
I like it. Well, that links, when people would try and say, "Oh, you've changed," and do it in a bad way, like it's a bad reason to change. So if ever that ever happens, I would always just say, "Thanks."
Yes.
Because who wants to say the same if you really think about it?
Do you always say it in that voice?
Thanks! My Southern Baptist voice. Yeah, leave your donations with Bobby Sue with the door. Don't know where that came from.
Let us all preach at the altar of Matt. We'll be the Boyles boys. Oh no! I mean, that's got. Let's move on. Let's change that.
Move on. But it's changed. Yes. I get. This should be your mission. Get people to get comfortable with change because it happens all the time, and it's brilliant because staying the same is boring and rubbish, and there wouldn't be any innovation or growth or development or wonder in the world if nothing changed.
Exactly that. Love that.
Yeah. Do you know what hasn't changed?
Book of the week.
Book of the week. Book of the week.
It's a shame, isn't it? It's a shame that it hasn't changed.
Just giving the people what they want, Jez. Giving the people what they want.
Right, come on. Let's have your book of the week. I'm excited.
Okay, you know how I said a few pods ago that I was bringing forth to the table the great American novel? Well, maybe I'm bringing the other great American novel to the table, although it's actually the little American novel because it's very wee, but it is a classic. Even you will have heard of it. You may not have read it. The Captcha in the Rye.
I have heard of that.
Oh, right, because you haven't read it.
No, of course not.
By J.D. Salinger. Actually, I didn't look, I think the 50s?
It's old, isn't it?
45. First published in America, 45. Wow. Oh. So why is this about change? Because it's written from the perspective of a teenager when surely our most tumultuous change period of our life.
Yeah.
It's brilliant for lots of different reasons. Partly because it wrong-foots you towards the end and it really changes your opinion or understanding of what's been happening. And I'm not going to say any more, but it's about this journey that this teenager goes on. And the ultimate thing is he doesn't want things to change. He tries to be a control freak and control everything. And part of the journey that he goes on is realizing that that's not possible. And it's just brilliant. And his sister Phoebe is a brilliant character, one who's even better as a character, even better than him. But it's just I really recommend this book. Is
it a physical journey or a metaphorical?
Oh yeah, he goes on a journey he breaks out or escapes from school and goes to New York basically, and it's all the things that happen there. And he tries to be grown up and then he doesn't, and he gets all these things that he thinks he's ready for and confront him, and then he's not. It's very go.
I have more questions. Is he a baseball catcher?
No, it's nothing to do with baseball.
Okay, and what's the rye? Is it rye bread?
It is also not rye bread. It's to do with a song or poem he hears and misunderstands as well.
Oh, okay.
So it's neither bread nor baseball. Appalled.
It's one of the most famous books in the world, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It really is.
It's published by Penguin, wasn't it?
Oh, you're good. Was indeed, and still is.
Yeah, it's one of the literary classics.
Truly is.
Oh, lovely.
There we go. Jez, have you got a BOTW, as everyone's calling it?
When you say everyone, do you mean you?
I mean me. BOTW. What's your BOTW like this week?
What? Why? What is it with everybody acronyms? Do you know what, the other day, lovely Mr. Wonderful was watching a video and they abbreviated, it was an American video, and they abbreviated, oh my God, what was the thing? I said, what the hell? Like, what is it with, I mean, it's a big American thing, to abbreviations, they're massive in the States. But everyone's getting a little bit lazy, BOTW. It was something like, it was nonsensical, like the first ingredient or something, you know. And so they would say, now, obviously, TFI, the first ingredient, is, and I was like, well, I mean, if you're abbreviating it and then have to say it, You've now said far too much already, and it was something that just didn't need to be abbreviated. I was like, what's happening, people? I'm thinking of setting up a commune for all the people that want to live normally, which I probably should have said normally. Now, I've got 2 books that are relevant to today, but I know that if I do 2, you will have a lot to say about it. So I'm going to number them off screen. 1 and 2. Yeah, pick 1 or 2.
Oh, always 2.
Oh, I can have both. Great. So no. This
Hoisted
is
by my own petard.
Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit.
Lovely.
And this, I always measure a good book on my shelf by how many, as you know, by how many dog ears there are. And this is a virtual puppy farm. There are so many dog ears in here. It's significantly bent, this book. So it's called The Power of Habit. Why we do what we do and how to change. Charles Duhigg, he's, I believe, a reporter, investigative reporter, but he sort of interviews lots of different people in here and looks at the science. So obviously there's something called a habit loop, which is why habits work, the sort of self-reinforcing cycle that we go through. It's a really, really, really interesting book. There's a lot of the sort of why and the sciencey stuff, interviews various different people, but also there's some great social examples. So there's a whole chapter on Starbucks and how Starbucks populated everything and why they're everywhere and how they grew massively suddenly very quickly. But also there's some really interesting things. So there's the Montgomery Bus Boycott in Saddleback Church, which is a famous sort of protest in the US. And so that chapter explores how movements happen. So how we can en masse get other people to change and think differently as well and change other people's habits. And I believe in here, it's give me 20 seconds to make sure. I'm 90% certain it's in this book. There's another book very similar, which is absolutely amazing as well. I think in here, it explains how the Colgate, I believe, other tooth brands are available until they sponsor us, in which case it's the only one you should use. But it explains how Colgate encouraged people to start brushing their teeth, because pre-50s, brushing your teeth wasn't a thing that people did. And so they had to change a nation's habit to start to understand that actually, brushing your teeth was really important. And it explains how telling people they should brush their teeth didn't work. Also, telling people they should brush their teeth because it's better for your teeth and it's better for gum disease. And we've got this kind of gum disease thing going on in the US, and they've got some oral healthcare issues. That didn't work either.
Right.
But what did work is showing the perfect family. Mum, dad, little boy, little girl with bright, white, shiny teeth, exactly that. And so the emulation of I want to be like them was more powerful to change a habit than it was just to say this is better for your health. And that, if nothing else, should be a lesson to all of us as to why the country that we live in is in such a mess, because people don't necessarily use the right form of habit enforcing or control.
I see. Wow.
It is published, thanks for asking, by Random House. It's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg.
Lovely.
It's a shame you didn't pick number 1. That's a really good book. Never mind.
You can have it next week. You'll shoehorn it in, I'm sure, in some way.
So what's the sort of the biggest barrier to change that you see in your work, Matt?
Okay. People coming in thinking, if you come in thinking this isn't something that's going to work, if you come in with some kind of with any kind of negative attitude, no, that isn't it. That isn't fair, because we're allowed to have doubts. And some people have said, "Oh, I'm not sure this is going to work," and then it works. So actually, it's not that.
Let's just explore that for a second. So when they say, "I'm not sure this is going to work,"
yeah,
what's your belief as to where that comes from. Do you believe that where they are right now and where they're supposing or would like to be, or you're encouraging them to be, is so far removed in terms of mindset, physically, the change of who they are, the identity, that it's so far away that they just don't believe that they could ever achieve that? The equivalent of saying to a 6-year-old, you could be an astronaut, or you could be, you know, president of the United States of America. I remember once saying to a friend's child, what do you want to be when you're older? Do you want to be, you know, a policeman or a teacher or a doctor or the prime minister? And their mum laughed. And I said, why is that funny? And she said, well, it's not going to be a prime minister, are they? And I said, well, why not? I said, somebody's got to be the prime minister.
Yeah.
Why isn't it that? The best advert I saw ever in my life so far was on a plane. I always flick through the magazine on a plane, and there was a picture of a little kid with big sort of pretend glasses, a plastic stethoscope, and a sort of like oversized white coat. Yeah. You know, play pretend doctor. And it said something like the next generation of radiologists don't even know it yet, or something like that. And I think, oh my God, that is amazing. You know, there's kids running around that are just kids, kicking sand, picking their nose, you know, whatever, pulling on dog fur, that are going to be the next generation of everything.
Yeah. So that makes me really sad that your friends actively in front of the child said they weren't going to be prime minister.
Oh, but Matt, you see that all the time, right? I mean, everywhere you go, you see people dismissing children and telling, you know, one of the most dismissive and destructive words, I think, that exists in the human language is the word can't. Because if you tell a child they can't do something, then they stop trying, they give up. And it's similarly damaging to adults as well. You know, if you tell anybody, well, you can't do that, you know, you don't do that, you can't touch that, you can't have this, you can't whatever. Well, then it immediately becomes something that isn't attainable anymore, right?
Well, equally, some people dig their heels in and then make it's all like, if you say, oh, you can't have a biscuit, but I want a biscuit, that's all I can think about, which is why in my programs I never say you can't have a biscuit. Yes. I say, have a biscuit. Learn to live with biscuits because they're part of life. Do you know what? Just going back, I think people think if they don't know the detail of my approach, that they think I'm going to make them give up all food, all the nice in inverted commas food. I'm going to make them exercise every day. That it's going to hurt. That it's going to take over their life. That it has to take over their life to work. Because I think there's so much in the fitness industry about, oh, if you're not puking, it's not working. And it's like that works for 0.5% of the population. Everyone else does need a softer, kinder approach. So helping people realize it's not how, and you know what we're like. Once you get an idea, it goes round and round. If you don't talk to someone about it, go round and round in your head and get bigger and bigger and more vague and amorphous. Oh, the concept of exercise is something so big and terrifying that it's not something I'll ever do. Yeah. Doesn't need to be. Talk to me or whoever, or just do it, or go out for a walk. Like, it doesn't need to be how it's been stylized to appear. And that often is a barrier to change, because people think they've extrapolated their worst fears when it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this is the challenge, is that there are so many things about change that we ourselves get in the way of, but we don't necessarily identify with. We don't hear the language that we tell ourselves. Nope. We don't see the things we're doing that are holding us back. And of course, we'll naturally gravitate towards a comfort zone. And because our cognitive bias is so powerful, our ability to convince ourselves that our opinion is the right one, or what we're doing right now is the right thing.
And hang out with the same people who think the same as well.
Exactly that. It becomes self-supporting that, well, I probably am a bit too tired today. And I did exercise last month, to be fair. So, you know, and I did watch someone exercise. And, you know, it's like those, I know they're flippant, but they are also their value when people say things like, you know, you're supposed to drink 3 liters of water a day. gin is, 90% water, therefore, do you know what I mean? Or,
Yes.
or like they'll say, is a Bloody Mary 3 of my 5 a day?
Yes.
That kind of thing.
The lemon in my Corona.
Exactly that, yeah. But it's interesting that, topical beer, well done, yeah. My mum will say things like, she'll say, I've not been feeling very well, so I've started having a slice of lemon in some hot water in the morning, because that's good for you. I say, yeah, it is good for you. If you're just having the one, like 175 ml mug of water with a slice of lemon in it a day, it's possibly not doing anything for you, actually, Mum. But I like the psychology that you run with there, right? And then, of course, a week later, she'll say, I'll say, well, do you want your hot water? No, I'll have a cup of tea. And then she's forgotten about it. But then she'll get a little sniffle. I'll start having my hot water and lemon again. And you think, yeah, this is all this is all wrong. I feel sorry for us as a race, as a species, when we can't change as readily as I know we can, or when we don't change as readily as I know we can.
Look, this is your specialty. How can we right now here help people if they're struggling to change, big or small? What would be the number 2 or 1 or 2 things that we could say?
Wait 6 months and then buy my book.
Okay, and item 2.
Gosh, that's a really good question. I'm struggling because I'm just trying to think of the most efficacious piece of advice I can give, because there's tons. I think that there's sort of like a sideline piece of work here, isn't there? Which is identifying what it is that's preventing you from changing. I think the big assumption to make is to understand that it is probably because you don't know how to change. You don't have a centered kind of grounding that is comfortable enough to jump into something that's uncertain or unknown. Because, and that's not pointed or accusatory, that doesn't make you a bad person. It is just that human beings naturally keep ourselves safe. We sit within our comfort zones. You hear all the time about workplaces being in silos, and that's a bad thing. Well, I suppose it can be a bad thing, but it is entirely normal and understandable. Human beings live in silos their entire bloody life, right? You build up this little life of comfort, in the morning, I have a cup of tea, and then all these routines that we have, and your go-to cereal, and the fact that you've got 30 cookbooks in the kitchen, but you cook the same 5 meals over and over again, right? We have all of these comfort routines. So the first part, I think, is an understanding of, because raised awareness means we get a little bit more flexibility in the way that we think and feel, right? Rather than you just being very rigid, there's a sort of flexibility where you think, oh, okay, so this guy said that there's actually, this is normal for me to be able to push those boundaries a little bit. I then think the second thing is to decide very clearly on what the changes that you want to achieve. And that sometimes takes a bit longer. That's not something that you can just write in a journal. Sometimes that is 11 dog walks. That's, I don't know, a 2-week holiday doing nothing. That's a holiday away where you just let your mind, but sometimes you have to not think about it and it just drifts around in your head. Other times you might categorically, no, I know exactly what I want. And then you work backwards, because very often people try to work forwards. They say, what's the next thing I need to do? What should I do now? What should I do now? As opposed to saying, where do I want to be? And now let's work backwards to where I am now, so that I can kind of chain all of those changes together.
Lovely.
And then the third thing, this is my last thing, and then I'd be interested to hear yours as well. I would say, because a bazillion and one exercises you can do, but I think it's often this is about mindset. I would say the third thing is looking at where you are right now, understanding that you're not where you want to be, and then looking at what I call the what did I used to gave this a name, like not what if, but there's an alternative to everything, right? So if you don't do this, then what's the alternative? If you do this, what's the alternative? So what's the result of any of this going to happen? But if you don't do it, then what? If you do it, then what not? So
you could draw a flow chart, maybe. I've never seen that before. But like, if I do this, what will that take me? Like an
algorithm.
Like work it out, like just with two. And obviously, it's not always just two options, but
yeah, absolutely. Because very often you'll say to somebody, I don't know, do this, or shall we do this? And they say, oh no, I can't. And I'll say, okay, so what's the alternative? Like, there's two sides to absolutely everything, right? It's either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, then what? Is anyone going to die? No. Well, then should we just try it then? So whereas you very quickly get your head into a mindset where this is the decision I've made, without exploring the other one and then exploring the consequences of both decisions. Yes. And if the consequences are that there's nothing really dramatic that's going to happen, well, then you can pick either one. And if one doesn't work, we've got a backup, haven't you? Try that one instead. Yep. It's a bit like, do you remember, I think, one of was it the Testasodes or maybe where we spoke about how you would get movement into your life?
Episodes. Yeah.
And it could be that, you could do heel raises while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, or there's just loads of tiny little changes that you can make, because very often it's the big changes that we're scared of, but it's the little things where you suddenly look around and you go, oh, wow. This is my last thing I'm going to say. I realise I've spoken for loads about this. I'm so sorry.
No, don't.
This episode is the Jez Rose lecture on change. You said to me? When I first started working with you as a personal trainer, after many, many weeks, and I said, I don't know if I've really, come that far or whatever. And you said, when we first started, you were lifting 2.5 kilos. And now you're lifting
15.
12 kilos and 15 kilos, depending on what I'm doing. You said, so, there is a very clear period of change that you have gone through, but I couldn't start with 15. I barely laughed to lift 2.5. Heaviest thing I've lifted for years was a pencil. So it's a problem with being at a desk, isn't it? So I think it's those little incremental changes that you've got to embrace. We all want to be, the big change. We want to see that big change. It's the little block changes that get you to the big end of the big change, the result.
Love it.
What are your 3 or 9? I forget how many I've done.
I'm going to give you 1 because I think that people have suffered enough today. And your 3 are brilliant at helping you decide what to do. But change is more than just that. It's keeping it going. So for me, it's accountability.
Yeah, great.
It's whether it's public, maybe you say, like I saw on Twitter, someone said he set an auto tweet that said, if you see this tweet, it means I haven't got up on time. And the first 5 people to reply to me, I will Venmo, PayPal them $25.
Amazing.
And obviously that was to make sure he got up every morning. And so that tweet didn't auto tweet. He could delete it every morning.
Loved it.
So that's a great public accountability. Or a friend or a colleague or a personal trainer or a behavioral coach or like whoever, or a partner or a parent or a kid or a dog, but someone else other than you, maybe not a dog. Beethoven would make you accountable.
Oh yeah.
And Digby, the biggest dog in the world. Garfield was a cat, but good knowledge.
Denver, the last dinosaur.
I think we've gone off topic. But having that external connection, doing it for more than just you, really is powerful. And like we are social people, and I don't want people to be motivated by shame, although some people are. But that sort of impetus to, I don't want to let them down. I've got it. If my friend says he's going to be at the gym at 7 a.m., I better be at the gym at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
So accountability absolutely is my number 1 thing.
Amazing. Listen, Matt, I think we need to wrap up. We've gone on far too long.
We do.
And if we don't stop now, we won't, because there's so much more. But maybe, this is one of the things that we could pick up perhaps in series 2 or in a very special podcast about change. But let's do the wrap up, Mr. Matt. Tell them where and when and how and who.
Well, you've already found us, so don't forget to keep finding us wherever you find your podcasts, or you harvest and wrangle them. But also, do check out that Human Podcast on Instagram and Twitter for loads of more extra edutaining stuff.
Loads.
Don't forget the Human playlist on Spotify. 5 new songs every week linked to each episode that build into an ongoing. And as there's going to be 23 episodes, that's going to be 5 times 23, 135 songs in a playlist by the end of the year. What?
Wow, for free.
Free, 0 pence, no money. Well, no, you've got to pay for Spotify, but that's on you. Don't forget also the lovely Human merchandise, the T-shirts, A Touch of the Bear. Available in Jez's lovely T-shirt shop. Under his house, burrow down with your sharpest talons. I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
Oh, me neither. Goodbye, Matt.
Bye, Jez. See you next week.